I was about to say planning should be easy by now. 23 years in, I should have this down, right? And honestly, that sounds good for about 3 seconds, because the problem usually is not ideas. The problem is turning those ideas into tomorrow's lessons before I run out of time, energy, or patience. And here's where it gets weird. AI can absolutely make planning faster. Sometimes it's polished junk, and honestly, that can be even more dangerous. So this episode is not about letting a tool plan for you, it's about getting your time back without lowering the quality of what happens in class. Hey, welcome to Science Weise. I'm Peter Weise. Today we're talking about the very real teacher problem, faster planning without watering down the lesson. Okay, here's the thing. This is not about replacing your planning brain. It's about reducing blank page time. And the key idea of the whole episode is simple. AI drafts, teachers finalize. That's the rule. If I start with a prompt before I know the learning target, I usually get busy looking junk. But there's another layer to it, because if we aren't careful, AI gives us polished junk. It looks like a pro wrote it, but it functions like a generic subplan. It creates the illusion that we're ready for Tuesday when really we just automated the noise. But if I start with the target and the evidence I actually want from the students, now the draft has somewhere to go. That's really the backbone here. Start with the target, start with the evidence, then build from there. So I want to give you 3 classroom usable moves, not 20, not a giant flowchart. 3 moves. First, draft planning artifacts, not the whole lesson. Next, use exemplars and non-exemplars to make quality visible. Then build supports that help students get into the task without doing the thinking for them. That's the roadmap. So, first move, draft the planning skeleton first. This helps when you're not actually stuck on the content. You're stuck on turning the content into the choreography of the lesson, something that works on a Tuesday at 10:14 a.m. with real human teenagers. The mistake people make is asking AI for a great lesson plan. That's too big, too vague. It gives the tool way too much room to sound smart without being useful. Instead, get specific. Write the learning target in 1 sentence. Write the evidence you want students to produce. Then ask 2 or 3 sentence options. 1 quick check for understanding and likely misconceptions. Think of it as a 3-part recipe. Context, who are the kids? Constraint, how much time do I actually have? And concrete output, what exactly do I want back? A table, not a story. A warm-up, not a whole unit. If you don't give it constraints, it will happily give you a 14-step lesson for a 50-minute class. Now, that's something you can actually work with. So your teacher talk might sound something like this. Here's the target. Students will explain why one reactant limits the amount of the product. Here's the evidence I need. I want a short, written justification, not just the final answer. Give me 3 lesson flow options, 2 common misconceptions, and 1 quick check I can run in under 3 minutes. This is usable. Now, what do students do? Ideally, they get a lesson that has a cleaner flow, clearer checkpoints, and less of that feeling where the class sort of drifts from one thing to another because the teacher was building the bridge while driving over it. And what are you looking for? You're looking for whether students can state the goals of the lesson, whether your check for understanding reveals an actual misconception, and whether the tasks line up with the target instead of drifting into busy work. If this goes sideways, cut the draft harder. Do not reward the AI for being wordy. You are the editor. Cut hard. Here's a science example. Let's say I'm planning a chemistry lesson on limiting reactants. I write the target. Students will determine the limiting reactant and justify their choice using mole relationships. Then I ask for 3 lesson sequence options, 1 misconception list, and 1 strong and 1 flawed worked example. I might keep the misconception list, rewrite the example in my own class language, and toss half the rest. Then students start with the flawed example and sort out where the reasoning breaks. After that, they solve a parallel problem. That's the point. The draft gets me to version 1 faster. I still do the instructional thinking. And even if you do not use a tool at all, the non-tool version still works. Write the target, write the evidence, sketch 2 lesson flows, then pick 1. Same move, just slower. Okay, let's apply that to something a little more general. Here's an example that will probably feel familiar. It's Friday, long week. A teacher already knows the topic, but not the shape of the lesson. Instead of asking for a full lesson plan, they give the target, the misconception they keep seeing, and the kind of evidence they want at the end. The AI gives back 3 rough options, 2 are generic, 1 includes a quick comparison activity using strong and weak student style responses. The teacher keeps that part, rewrites the wording, adds an exit ticket, and now instead of spending 35 minutes building from nothing, they spend 15 minutes revising something that's already moving. That's a real win. Not because the draft was brilliant, because it got them to the useful revision stage faster. And that's the one-line recap for move 1. Outsource the blank page, not the judgment. Second move, use exemplars and non-exemplars. Here's where it gets really helpful. Planning gets faster, yes, but it also gets better if students can actually see what quality looks like. The key idea is that an exemplar is not just a model answer, it's a teaching tool. And a non-exemplar is often even more useful because the students have to diagnose what's off. Research on exemplars points in the same direction here. They work best when students compare them, discuss them, and judge them against visible criteria, not when we just hand them out and assume students will automatically know what to notice. And so here's a classroom move you can actually run. Before an assignment, show one strong example and one flawed example. Not a disaster, more like a B- version. Then ask students 3 questions. Which one would be more convincing to a reader and why? What is missing here besides polish? Where does the reasoning weaken or break? The teacher talk matters because if you only ask which one's better, students will often just pick the prettier one. You want them naming the criteria. So in class, students compare first, then draft. What are you listening for? You are listening for whether they can describe quality in their own words. Not just this one is better, but this one has a clear claim. Or this one uses evidence but does not explain it. Or this one sounds polished but actually says less. That last part matters a lot in an AI world. Now, let me jump to an ELA example. Picture a 10th grade literacy analysis paragraph about how an author develops a theme. A colleague might ask AI to draft 2 paragraphs, one strong, one weak, based on the prompt, but not based on student work. Then they edit both and highlight 3 look-fors: claim clarity, evidence integration, and commentary depth. Students compare the 2 before they write, and they notice something important. The paragraph that sounds finished is not always the paragraph that thinks clearly. That's exactly what you want, because now students are learning standards, not just copying style. And if this goes sideways, the fix is simple. Shorten the samples and reduce the criteria. 2 examples, 2 or 3 look-fors, that's enough. And by the way, this is not just science and ELA. In algebra, a teacher could draft 1 worked example and 1 error-filled non-example for solving systems. They have students identify the exact step where the reasoning breaks before trying a new problem. In U.S. history, a teacher could draft a strong claim paragraph and a weak counterexample paragraph for a document-based question. Then they have students judge which one actually uses sourcing and evidence better before they write their own. Same move, different class, same logic. Now, one quick research checkpoint here, because this is the part that really matters. Worked examples tend to help novices when they are making process visible, and they get even stronger when students have to explain the reasoning, not just copying the pattern. So pause for 5 seconds. If you're driving, say it out loud to the windshield. If you're at your desk, jot it down. Examples help most when students have to explain their work. Third move, differentiate the access point, not the target. This is the part where people can accidentally lower rigor while thinking they're helping. Support is good, confusion is not rigor. But support that does the thinking for the students is not support anymore, it's a substitution. So what can AI help draft here? Cleaner directions, sentence starters, vocabulary supports, chunked instruction, maybe a reading level variant of background text. Fine, but the rule is that the learning targets stay the same. So your teacher talk might sound something like this. I'm making the directions clearer, not the thinking easier. Use this sentence starter if it helps you begin, but your reasoning still has to be yours. This support gets you into the task, it does not finish the task. That language matters because the students are trying to figure out whether the support helps them start or lets them off the hook. Those are not the same thing. Ask yourself the mirror test. If the student uses this support, are they still the ones doing the heavy lifting? If the sentence starter is so long that the students only add 1 word at the end, that's not scaffold, that's substitution. What do students do? They start faster. They ask fewer procedural questions. They spend more energy on the content instead of burning it on decoding the directions. And what are you looking for? Fewer, wait, what do I do questions? Faster starts, more students actually attempting the task. But also, and this is important, the final responses should still show independent reasoning. If every answer suddenly sounds the same, your scaffold probably went too far. If this goes sideways, remove the part of the support that's doing the thinking. Keep the access support, cut the intellectual crutch. And yes, if you're using something like Gemini or Notebook LM in a district managed space, this can be a reasonable teacher-facing use, especially when you're grounding your supports into your own materials. But the tool-agnostic version here is easy. You can do this with your own directions and a red pen. Shorter sentences, better chunking, cleaner vocabulary, same moves. One quick caution, if student identifiable information is involved, keep it in the approved lane or redact it. This episode is mostly about teacher workflow, not privacy training, so that's the quick version. Now a brain checkpoint. Why do these moves work? Not because AI is magical, mostly because planning has friction, and some of that friction is useful while some of it's just annoying. We want to reduce the annoying friction and keep the productive thinking. Research on retrieval practice is useful here too. It consistently helps learning across lots of classroom settings, which means that the time you save planning should ideally buy you more room for the kinds of moves that actually improve learning. Quick retrieval, explanation, comparison, short transfer checks, not just prettier materials. That is the key distinction. Saving time on planning is valuable if it gives you more time for what actually moves learning. And here's a misconception check. This does not mean every lesson needs AI. It does not mean every teacher needs a giant workflow overhaul. It does not mean polished drafts are automatically stronger instruction. Pretty is not the same as teachable. A smoother worksheet can still produce weaker thinking. So the one-line recap here is this. Faster planning is only a win if the lesson still produces observable thinking. Now, before you go hit generate, let's look at the 5 red flags. These are the signs that faster planning is starting to sabotage better teaching. Mistake 1, using drafts unreviewed. No, the whole point is that the AI drafts and the teacher finalizes. That's not a slogan, that's a safety feature. Mistake 2, confusing polished wording for strong instructional design. Students do not learn because your handout sounds fancy. Mistake 3, creating supports that quietly removes the hard thinking. If the scaffold contains the explanation, the student is no longer doing the explanation. Mistake 4, making everything tool-centered instead of evidence-centered. Start with the target, start with evidence, then decide what tools help. Mistake 5, and this is the fast version, putting student identifiable information where it does not belong. Keep that boundary clear. And because I know somebody is thinking it, no, the goal is not to AI-proof school. The goal is better classroom design, better evidence of learning, and teaching sustainability. So what does this sound like in an actual room? Let's go back to chemistry for a second. I give students one strong worded solution and one flawed one for limiting reactants. I say, don't solve it yet. First tell me where the flawed one goes off the rails. Students mark the exact step, talk to a partner, then solve a parallel problem. Now I've got usable evidence. I'm listening for whether they can explain the reasoning break, not just point at a line. Now let's pivot to the humanities side of the hallway. A colleague says, read both paragraphs. Which one actually develops a theme instead of just sounding smart? Students talk, identify where commentary is thin, and now when they draft, they know what the standard feels like. Now I've got usable evidence there too. And the same pattern travels. In math, the flawed might be a step into algebraic reasoning. In social studies, that might be a claim that uses evidence without actually sourcing it. Different surface, same underlying move. So here's the try it this week. Do not redesign the whole unit. Please do not redesign the whole unit. Pick one task you're already assigning. Make one exemplar and one non-exemplar. Add 3 quick annotations. What makes one strong, what makes one weak, and what students should notice first. That's it. If you want AI to draft version 1, fine. Then you revise it. If you do not want to use AI, write them yourself. Same move. Success this week looks like students starting faster, asking fewer "what do you want" questions, and using more of your criteria in their own language. That's a good week. So let's close this out. Planning time is the bottleneck, not ideas. AI can help with that, but only if you keep the judgment, only if you start with the learning target and the evidence, only if you treat the draft as raw material, not a finished product. You do not need AI to be creative. You might need it to get to draft 1 faster. Keep the judgment, outsource the blank page. And if you try one of these moves, or if you hit a wall with one of them, send me the real question you have. Those are usually the best episodes anyway. If the research pieces from today matter to you, sources are down in the doobly-doo. See you next time.